When I was in federal prison, I heard a couple of common refrains. And when I heard Letitia James say that, I said, we have a problem. Something is coming. And she said it specifically in an interview with Joy Reid. Now, there is a sense of irony that I presume her lawyer said it's probably not a good idea to do these interviews. The government's watching. I know you believe it's a witch hunt. They're out to get you. Probably get off the grid. I'd lay low a little bit. That's certainly what a prosecutor would advise a defendant to do. But even though she's a prosecutor and on her way to becoming a defendant, it's very hard to take that advice from lawyers. Once I heard her say, did not have bad intentions, that's game one. That's game over. That's what every guy said in federal prison. Here's another thing her lawyers have said repeatedly, and I've been filming some shorts on this for a little while. And whenever a defendant says, or someone who is the target of an investigation says, this is the weakest case ever, that tells me an indictment is coming. It is so common for someone to think it's weak, it's civil, it will never become criminal. They're going to move on. My lawyers have assured me this is weak, it's nothing. And then the indictment comes. If you're being investigated and you are supposed to be held to a higher standard, irrespective of how you feel about the politics, you're going to be scrutinized and problems can follow. So when I heard her tell Joy Reid she did not have bad intentions and her lawyers insinuated a mistake was made, but there was no bad intentions and it's a weak case, that told me an indictment was inevitable. I wrote a quick, short blog before I decided to do this YouTube live. By the way, welcome to the White Collar Advice community. I strive to provide insights from my experience as a federal prisoner. I maintain that we send too many people to prison in this country, whether it was Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, James Comey, Letitia James. I think it would be a waste of taxpayer money to warehouse them, like it was a waste of taxpayer money to warehouse Bannon and Navarro. We send too many people to prison in this country. But I do want to touch on the irony. See, when you are a prosecutor and you build your career by getting indictments, and that's how you run for office and get reelected and raise money, let me tell you what that means. Okay. You've got to be so above reproach. You've got to be so perfect. So perfect, it is insane. So when I read something, let's transition to the blog I wrote here. When I read the case centers on a 2023 mortgage she helped her niece obtain in Virginia. Prosecutors allege she falsely claimed that it would be her primary residence. Her lawyers say it was a simple error. See, let me come back to this for a moment. You cannot make an error. You cannot make an error when you spend your whole entire career on the other side of the process of punishing, ruining lives, sending people to prison who should not go to prison for making an error, for not having bad intentions. Our team at White Collar Advice has worked with thousands of people traversing this really difficult system. And I have been writing extensively about white collar crime since I wrote that first blog, October 12th, 2008, from prison, that led to Lessons from Prison, my first book, and then Ethics in Motion, which profiles good people who do not intend to make bad decisions, yet they came into the crosshairs of the criminal justice system. And there they are standing for count, walking the track, standing in line at the commissary to buy toothpaste and Folgers coffee. No different from her. Didn't have bad intentions. I think of people who, the wife, the grandmother, the spouse signs a tax return that her husband fraudulently sign it. Okay, I sign it. Why does the wife or grandma or mother get indicted? The husband threatens to go to trial. Go to trial? You're gonna take the Department of Justice to trial? No kidding. Did the wife sign the tax return? She doesn't know what she's signing. I mean, how many things have you signed, your spouse or friend? Did the wife sign the tax return? She did. Okay, he's talking about going to trial. Yeah. He's talking about going to trial. He won't sign the plea agreement. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to indict her too because she didn't have bad intentions. No different from what her lawyer says. A simple error. Her husband told her to sign the tax return. We're going to indict her too. Yeah. Go get her at 6 a.m. The guns, the dogs, the helicopter. I want a press release up on the Department of Justice website tomorrow that she's a criminal and scum and trash. And she's an abater. She doesn't pay her taxes like her husband because he threatened to go to trial. They overcharge. It's ridiculous. I would propose prosecutor do that. They certainly did it in the Biden DOJ. I know because anyone in the world that touched crypto, that's a wrap. You touch crypto, you are a criminal. Absurd. Overcharged. So when the lawyer says simple error, here is the irony. You indicted people for that same damn error. You should be perfect, above reproach. Let's continue. When defendants are traversing this process, and she has endured this scrutiny for a long time, and she has someone who is apparently not such a huge fan of hers, including very powerful people, she should understand the repercussions that could follow, again, if she is not perfect. If she is not perfect. So now she's in the crosshairs of the criminal justice system. And the thumbnail I quickly made for this video says something akin to, I've seen this movie before. I know what happens next. Despite the ridiculous statement of I did not have bad intentions, it is a weak case. She now moves deeper into the crosshairs of the criminal justice system, and take no pleasure or joy that she is enduring this. It's very hard for her and her family. The point is, you cannot expect people to be held to a different standard. It is not fair. We send too many people to prison for crimes they should not have been indicted for. You cannot be expected to be treated differently. So here's what will happen next. She'll have an appearance in Virginia court for this indictment of bank fraud. She will be formally advised of the charges. She's actually lucky in some ways because her administration, what the DOJ at times can do, they'll come and arrest you at 6 a.m. They'll arrest you on a Friday. They'll keep you in a detention center for the whole weekend so you can get a sense of what it's like to stand for count and go to the bathroom in front of 50 people in the shackles and chains and make a show out of it. I saw Comey was able to turn himself in. Fortunate. Didn't see much of that in the prior administration. They could have arrested her. They could have taken her, and I suspect she's going to have a slightly different experience. Certainly she's going to get released on bond, and like others on both sides of the aisle, there'll be an entire media circus, right? Those on the left, it's a witch hunt, it's not justice, it's not fair. Of course, they said the same thing in the prior administration. It's all just whatever advances their own political agenda. That's all, nothing more. That's it. There'll be the indictment, they'll release the charging documents, there'll be a discovery phase. Naturally, her lawyers are going to ask that this entire thing be dismissed. And we both know Comey or Letitia James is not taking a plea agreement. And I don't suspect, let me go back to the blog here for a moment. I don't suspect that either of them are going to take a plea agreement. I don't suspect that during the discovery phase and lawyers filing motions, it's going to be thrown out. If you get indicted by a grand jury, there's a pretty good chance it's going to proceed, and then she'll endure something that frankly very few prosecutors do, which is sit as I wrote at the defense table, listening to the system she once represented, albeit if it was state in New York, make its case against her. And it's not so much about politics, even though some of you disagree, or even the headlines. It is about the evidence. It is about how a jury would interpret everything that is transpired. And I presume if she was convicted, it could be a case where she could serve a little time in what would be a minimum security camp, something that I endured 388 days. It wasn't that significant or severe, but now she's in the crosshairs of the criminal justice system. I can tell you what the hardest part is. It's the waiting and wondering. It's, yes, the expense of hiring lawyers and preparing. It is the stain on her reputation, but there's also living in limbo for a very long time. This case could take 1 or 2 years before it plays out with motions and stalling and delays, especially because she's going to go to trial. This ain't going to be no quick, yeah, let me sign a plea agreement, get ready for the probation interview and move to the next phase. She's going to trial. That could take some time with great expense financially and emotionally. It's very stressful. It's very hard for a defendant to prepare for trial, especially in a high-profile case when everything is being reported and there are people online impugning her character. You may surmise that I'm one of those people. Here's all I'm saying. I'm cynical against prosecutors because I believe they bring too many charges. I don't mean to impugn her character. The point that I'm making is she should have held herself to a higher standard, and I knew it was a formality. She would get indicted when she insinuated it was a weak case and she did not have bad intentions. I heard it every single day while I was walking that track in federal prison. Well, what could she do next? Like, what could a defendant potentially do, even someone that's so high profile, where so many people's minds have already been made up. What she could do is something that too few prisoners actually do, and in retrospect, many wish they would have done differently. There could be some value in agreeing with some of the government's version of events. Now, she says she made a mistake here. Fine. It could be construed differently and I think the case would have gone differently, perhaps had she had a fuller acceptance of responsibility. But it's just defiance, 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 and that could compel a DOJ to say, well, there's no acceptance here. You're not acknowledging any of the facts here, just defaulting to I didn't have bad intentions. So part of her opportunity has gone awry or to the wayside because of how she responded to it. It's not a good idea to lambast the government on television when the prosecutor who could be indicting you is watching that interview. It doesn't go well, which is how she should have done what I said earlier. She should have laid low. She should have said nothing, should have let the process play out. But instead, you can't resist. It's very hard to resist responding when people are coming after you and people are taking pleasure in your pain. And that's sort of the culture that we are in right now in this world, where we take pleasure in the pain of other people on both sides. It's just the way that it is. I have so many friends that have left social media. You know what they say to me like a month later? I've never been so happy. I've never been so fulfilled. So certainly some people are taking pleasure in this. It doesn't change that it's someone who's been indicted. She's facing a sentencing, potentially if convicted, and some time in prison. So what could she do next? It would be in her interest to invest time with her lawyers to really help them understand like how this so-called mistake happened. Because even though her lawyers claim she wrote the property will not be my primary residence, it would be very easy for a prosecutor to construe that was simply the cover-up. It doesn't change what had already been done. And frankly, I have a little bit of experience with that. When I was working at UBS in 2003 or 4, I knew that a client of mine was making some misrepresentations to raise money, and I was the stockbroker executing trades for a commission. But because I knew that he was lying to people to raise money, and because I was executing trades, eventually why I went to prison, I sought to cover up or protect myself in case there would be any fallout. So I can assure you the prosecution is going to argue that when she told her lender the property will not be my primary residence, what she had already put in place was done. In my case, when I learned that my client, a hedge fund manager, was lying to raise money, and I learned about it, I went to UBS in New York and in Connecticut and said, we should write a letter that absolves us from any responsibility, meaning if you choose to invest in this guy's hedge fund, and if you lose money, you cannot sue Justin Paperny or anyone at UBS. The government alleged the reason behind the letter was criminal. I wrote it to protect myself. The government is going to allege this statement, this property will not be my primary residence, was simply done to protect herself. The end result she wanted, it had already happened by virtue of what she had done previously. She could have done more to stop it. She did not. Hence, we have an indictment, regardless of how you feel about it. We encourage people in our community to approach it from the perspective of what is success for a stakeholder? What was success for her as a prosecutor? To bring cases, to send people to prison under the guise of justice, raise money, and get reelected. I mean, that was success for her. Okay. Well, it's no different for a federal prosecutor. This federal prosecutor someday is going to be a defense attorney. It's going to be on their resume, on their LinkedIn profile when they become a defense attorney, that they were once a United States attorney, the cases they brought, the convictions they got, the total amount of restitution and forfeiture they obtained, the lengthy sentences they obtained while prosecuting criminals, all under the guise of justice. So these prosecutors indeed are doing the same exact thing that she did as a prosecutor. It's why I've seen the same movie so often. And now that she's in the system, she will be treated no differently than me, like some regular schmo. I'm 50 now, some regular schmo who learned that I was a defendant at 33, surrendered to the marshals in downtown Los Angeles, pled guilty. They take the DNA sample. That's cool. Thank you. About 40 dudes there. We're all there in a suit and tie. And we're all wondering, how did we end up here? This was not part of the life trajectory, waiting in line at the United States Marshals in a holding cell and taking a DNA sample and a photo This wasn't where I thought I would be, no different from Letitia James. That's why I've seen the same movie. In a million years, she never imagined she'd be surrendering to a federal courthouse and getting arraigned and posting bond. She will get credit for 1 day in jail, by the way. That's what happened when you get arraigned. She knows the system, though she's never seen it from this perspective. She will be on pretrial supervision, no different from I was, or Donald Trump was, or the thousands of people with whom our team has worked. She will have to report to a pretrial services officer. And that is very humbling for someone who is like a prosecutor, a top law enforcement who's on television and can go on any left-wing media outlet in like 17 seconds. I assure you the interviews are already being lined up if they're not happening already, right? So for someone in a position of power and influence with resources, who to the day that she dies will be able to maintain that she got a conviction or a huge settlement of $400 million against Trump, even though it was eventually overturned, there is a level of seriousness to her. She's accomplished in her opinion. So to then report to a lower level bureaucrat who's going to say, so like, what did you do last week? Any contact with law enforcement? Do you have to travel? If so, I need permission 48 hours in advance. You need to fill out a form. Oh, you want to travel? You didn't give it to me. Now, certainly there's higher levels of liberty that some defendants get. There is no doubt. But when you're in the crosshairs of the bureaucracy that is the Bureau of Prisons, if you go, or dealing with an indictment, they have a process. The process of getting processed to the marshals in Pearl Street in New York isn't that different from where I was processed in downtown Los Angeles a very long time ago. It ain't changed much. So she's going to be on pretrial supervision. She'll have to check in once a week or so. She has to call if there's any police contact, if she's moving, if she's traveling. Some people, it's an inconvenience. For me, I'm like, it's a 7-second phone call. Hi, Justin Perperni here. Nothing's changed over the last week. Yes, I'm still working. No new arrests or indictments. No, everything's good. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm so happy that I've pled guilty to a federal crime and I'm going to be sentenced to prison soon. This is fantastic. It's a dream. No, I didn't say that, but that's what I'm thinking. How the hell did I end up here? No different from what she's thinking right now. Then she's going to prepare for trial. And I would encourage her to prepare for trial under the presumption that's going to be a rap she's going to lose. I'm not a lawyer and I haven't read discovery, but do you know why she should work under the presumption she's going to lose? Because most people lose. Come on, people, get it together. Am I talking to myself here? Most people lose. Do you know how many people prevail at trial? It ain't much. And I've addressed why. There is this bias or thin slicing that exists. When someone sees your name versus the United States of America, remember the warden in Shawshank Redemption when he goes, you must have done something like that. The jury's going to think you must have seen something. You must have done something. There's this presumption, and it makes it very hard to overcome an indictment. It's really hard to prevail at trial. I've said a long time. I think we've had close to 90 people in our community go to trial. We've had 2 people prevail. And I don't bear responsibility because I'm not a trial lawyer, but I can tell you of those 88 or so people who have lost, till the day they die, they will maintain their innocence and say, dude, I knew if I lose, I'm going to get a longer sentence, but I didn't do it. I didn't have bad intentions. I thought it was a weak case. I'm willing to endure a longer federal prison sentence to maintain my innocence. I will endure. That is a higher value to me than saying I did something I did not do, which of course leads to, what is this, a political reform? Which leads, it's part of the reason so many innocent people actually plead guilty, because they know the odds of prevailing at trial are so low. When I did all this media around this Varsity Blues case, and she has resources too, this Varsity Blues case where we represented all these parents, Massimo, Lori, and all these people, oh, these rich people are buying their way out of jail. It's like, do you know the resources of the government, the prosecution? Do you know the resources they have? Our tax dollars. They're prioritizing this case. You got $1 billion. It ain't enough. Now you may say, yes, that office doesn't have $1 billion. They have a lot of resources. So she is up against a really wicked system that was once her friend and ally for a very long time. And it's just such an irony. They have a prosecutor facing a trial, most likely a conviction, and a potential sentencing hearing, which comes back to what I said a couple of minutes ago. She should work under the presumption she's going to lose. You create that insurance policy. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I got young kids, I have life insurance. About a month ago, I was running, some 16-year-old in a Range Rover was texting. The kid nearly ran me over. And before he almost hit me, thankfully he didn't. I thought, at least I got such great insurance on my kids. My wife will find somebody great. I hope he takes great care of my kids. That's what goes through your mind when you think you're about to get hit by a car. They're protected, they're okay. She should, to the extent that she can, has the ability and resolve to prepare for, she needs to create insurance. She needs to prepare for the reality that at some point she may face a sentencing hearing, and a judge, whether it's a liberal or, and I've seen it all. I've been to 1,500 sentencing hearings. I've seen very liberal judges in New York, like Judge Kaplan, Fillet, some defendants, and I've seen pretty conservative judges. I would argue like Judge Holcomb. I went to a sentencing hearing recently in Santa Ana, more of a conservative judge, and everything in between. Mercurial, nice, mean, talk, don't talk. Some are 85, some just came on the bench. I've seen everything. But it doesn't change. If indicted and convicted, the judge is going to look at the indictment and the conviction and rely heavily on the probation report. The probation report is going to recommend how long she should serve in prison at all. So to the extent she can begin preparing even now for a potential probation interview, she should, because that officer is going to recommend like what should happen to her. How long should she go away? If she goes away, what program should she participate in? If she has mitigating factors in her life, health, wellness, trauma, this is the time to begin to develop that record. If she's done good things in her community, volunteer work, contributions, this is the time to begin documenting it. She needs to do what any defendant would do. She's now a federal defendant in Virginia, and it's a big deal. She needs to build a record that shows what? That shows what? That she is different than the government's version of events. And what are the government's version of events? Well, by virtue of the indictment, they view her as a criminal, as a crook. For her, she didn't have bad intentions. It was a simple error. You've been indicted by a grand jury. They view it differently. So the onus is on her to begin to change that narrative. And perhaps, because the guidelines are only guidelines if convicted, and a probation officer's recommendation is only a recommendation, you could persuade a judge to compel, maybe he gives her probation or some sort of home confinement if convicted. And that's how I'm going to wrap up this quick live YouTube video. I literally saw the indictment, wrote the blog, got a thumbnail. I'm online in about 17 minutes, 22 minutes, and here we go. I presume, of course, she's going to go to trial because she maintains her innocence, but I presume the sentence would most likely be the same whether she pled guilty or went to trial. So you might as well, go, if you lose, claim that you're a martyr. It was a victim of political, prosecution. If the sentence and the guidelines aren't going to be that different at the end of the day, you might as well go to trial and hope that you win. And I suspect she's going to do that. But there is no contemplation of a plea agreement. That much I can. There will be no plea in here. And I'll be interested to see how it plays out. If convicted, I don't see any prison time for her or Comey, exactly the same way it should have been for people like Bannon and Navarro and so many other people who serve such measly short sentences inside of minimum security camps or in low security prisons. It's a waste of time and resources and money, and we're broke in this country. And I think, should be pursuing other things. And I presume if this prosecutor didn't charge people the way that she did and make statements about righteousness and nobody being above the law, I suspect had she not done that, had she not said that and done even something she considers to be a mistake, we wouldn't be here. Can't ask people to do what you are not willing to do. That's why she was indicted. Thank you for watching.